Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. I am the Cosmere Connoisseur, and today, instead of streaming and trying to finally make Legendary, for the first time in ever, I thought I would take my knowledge as a beginner to intermediate Hearthstone player and impart it on you, my ever-faithful followers, and whoever finds this video online. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. I will take some time talking about deck types, mana curve, cards versus effects, tying it all together, and then a little overview and maybe even a test run if I have time. This is a 30-minute beginner deck tutorial. Let's go ahead and go right in. So unfortunately I started and I got about 13 minutes into recording and realized my microphone was off. I've already made a deck, but we're going to go back to my collection and discuss a few things. To begin with, there is the deck type. Now, class I'm going to leave out of this conversation entirely. Different classes have different strengths. However, it is fully possible to make any type of deck with any type of class. Your mileage may vary. Aggro cards, the four types of decks I'm going to talk about are aggro, control, mid-range, and combo. Aggro decks are fast, hard, and quick. So you'll have cards that are like stronger creatures in general, like a 1/1 for 1 or a 2/2 for 2 aren't good enough. You need something that, starts out with 2 or 3 or 4 attack. Like this guy. 1 mana for a 2/1 with Rush is a very aggressive card. Your mana curve will typically top out at 4 or 5, and you will typically focus on cards like him or cards that draw you cards very quickly and for little to no effort, like this peasant and whatnot. Now, a control deck does much the opposite. A control deck focuses on value. So value, for example, value and removal are the two stronger aspects of a control deck. So value here is summoning a minion from your deck and giving it both Taunt and Divine Shield. So now not only would you summon, say, Grommash from your deck, but he's also going to have Taunt and Divine Shield, in addition to Charge. Or even if you summon, a 1/1 or a lesser being, minion, what have you. This card is a great control card. It destroys a random enemy minion in addition to being a 6/6. Sure, it discards a card from your hand, but as a control player, you should have ways around that. Control game is a game that is very well thought out, with every plan and contingency considered and thought of. An aggro deck is a very, I'm going to play my card and attack with it, play my card and attack with it, play 2 cards and get these extra effects with them. A mid-range deck is not quite either one. So a mid-range deck is going to use some cards that give it value, but is by and far going to try and win quicker than a control deck. A control deck is typically a deck that is willing to sit there and fill up their hand and wait until turn 9, turn 10 before they even really get started. A mid-range deck is still doing stuff on turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, and really making an effort to get an aggressive start, even though they don't plan to win until after turn 10. Combo decks have a very specific combination of cards that will almost always cause them to win, and they very often are also control decks, because in order to survive long enough for the combo to work, you have to control the game to do so. One other keyword I'm going to talk about is a win condition. Control decks need a win condition more so than aggro or mid-range decks. A good aggro deck simply wins by doing what it does. It attacks, it attacks, it attacks, the enemy dies. A mid-range deck generally has that same mentality, but sometimes a win condition will help it along. Control decks almost always need it, because control decks will have small minions like this guy. Deals with 2 damage, is a creature, it's not bad. You know, drawing a death rattle that costs 4 or less, that's good value. And different cards provide different levels of value, but often you will want something like this. Drawing 5 cards, trigger all the death rattles that are drawn, because you need something that stops you from getting small marginal advantages and catapults you into the next level of I'm going to win. Or actually, a great example of a win condition is Gren Mage Antonidas. You've been casting fire spells for the whole game, now you play him, you get 3 fireballs shot at 3 different people. And it's a mage spell that I don't have, but Rune of the Archmage says cast 20 mana worth of spells at enemies. That's typically a win condition. You play and you do things till you hit turn 9, you cast that, and the spells that come out usually wreck your opponent to the point where instead of maybe tipping the tide a little bit, you have tipped the tide, and you have changed the course of the battle. So moving right along and talking about mana curve, unfortunately you can't see me as I make the deck, but to give you an idea of what a good mana curve is, starting from the lower cost of cards, different cards have different costs, and you want to spread out those costs so that they're even and evenly distributed as you draw cards while playing your deck. In this case, in my mid-range Hunter deck, you can see that my cards, most of the cards I have are 2 cost, and then I have proportionately less of 3 and 4 costs, and I have a couple of higher cost cards, but not really. And that's because it's a mid-range deck. It's not an aggro deck where all the costs are going to be concentrated in the 0, 1, and 2 cost cards, and it's not a control deck which is going to be everything farther on the higher cost side of things. Actually, I'll show you my Dragon Priest deck, and you can see in the Dragon Priest deck that while I have some cards that cost on the lower end of things, you can see it's a more even spread with a higher cost. And what this translates to is, as I continue to play and draw cards, I can mulligan my hand to get some of the lower cost cards, so I have things to do and use in the beginning of the game. Mid to late game, I will have the cards I need to properly address what my opponent's doing. And just to give you an idea, I will pull out my aggro deck, and this is an aggro druid deck, and it is very much designed to hit hard, hit fast, and destroy the enemy before they know what's happening to them. And that's why all of the cards there are in the 0, 1, and 2 range, and I only have one 4 card that costs 4, and it's Drekthar. And he's actually pretty good on his own. So the general idea of a mana curve is that it is spread even, is you don't want all cards that cost 1 or 2 or 4, because then you'll be doing things in multiples of that mana cost. You max out at 10 mana crystals for the whole game, you only gain 1 per turn. So a good mana curve is one that, on a random hand of 3 or 4 or 5 cards drawn, you will be able to play a 1 cost card on turn 1, a 2 cost card on turn 2, a 3 cost card on turn 3, and progressively so forth. And then when you get to turns 5 or 6, if you're playing an aggro, you might play 2 cards that cost 3, or a card that costs 2 and a card that costs 4, or 1 and 5. You get the idea. A control deck skips some of their curve on turns 2, 3, and 4, and then starting on turn 5 and 6 starts dropping bombs that just make the opponent not know what to do as far as what's going on. Like, for example, Shamans have a 7-8 with Overload, and that's your turn 5 play. And then on turn 6, well, oh, right, that helps. And then on turn 6, boom, here's Fire Elemental. Not only is he a big, beefy creature, but he does 4 damage. And then on turn 7, you have Alakir, the Wind Lord. and so forth. And every class has cards like this, and it's a very interesting curve you can have. So now we're going to talk about for a minute about, I've used words like removal, I've talked a little bit about creature effects like death rattle, and the other good aspect of deck building to keep in mind is how many creatures versus how many spells do you have. Because there once was a thing called a zoo deck. A zoo deck was called such because it had all creatures, no spells. Everything that you did was done with a creature that was played and stuck on the board. In most decks, I would tell people to have a decent 50-50. Half of your deck is spells, half of your deck is creatures. If you move the ratio, if you slide it towards more creatures than spells, that's fine, as long as your creatures also do things. For example, here's a creature that does nothing. Very rarely do you want to put into your deck a creature that does nothing, although there might be reasons for it later. Where is everyone's favorite? And almost all creatures these days do something. There once was a time where that wasn't the case, but River Crosslisk is actually an interesting example of a creature that does nothing and yet is still good enough to put into a deck. In this deck, 1, 2, 3, in this deck I have 16 creatures and 14 that are not. Of the 14 that are not, several of them are capable of summoning a creature anyway. For example, Selective Breeder discovers a copy of a beast in my deck, and there's 2. Oh wait, he's a creature. Tame Beast pulls a creature into play. Revive Pet gets me a creature, so it's really like I have 18 creatures. Notice, out of all my different creatures, the ones I'd like to point out... Oh, let's talk about removal for a second. Removal is the ability to remove an opposing creature from play. So for example, Deadly Shot. 3 mana destroys a random enemy minion. Spells like this, and more importantly creatures like this, are crucial because they allow one card to do 2 things, and that is where you gain value. You can gain value by having one card do multiple things, or you can gain value by having a card be harder to remove than normal. So for example, Mountain Bear has some crazy good value because at 6 health it's already really tough to destroy. There's certain removal spells that only do 2 or 3 or 4 damage, and it has 6 health, causing my opponent to need multiples of those, or to use a more powerful spell like Fireball to take out that one creature. When it dies, the death rattle says summon 2 2/4 cubs with taunt. And if you've ever played something that summons multiple taunt creatures with a lot of health, then you've seen firsthand how annoying that can be. Same goes for Savannah Hymen. It has 5 health, it dies, you get 2 2/2 hyenas. It makes it even more annoying to destroy because, yes, you removed a creature with 5 health, now you have to deal with 2 more creatures that have 4 health total. So that's a good example of death rattles and, staying powers, I'd like to think of it. Let's talk about Iron Beak Owl for a second. I like this because not only is it removal, but it's also it's a different type of removal. I think the correct word is tech, as in a technical aspect of the deck or a technical effect. I don't think it's situation based at all. silencing a minion takes away all of kind of its special abilities. So if your opponent played a 1/1 that had, say, Death Rattle summon a 9/1 Inquisitor, you could play this Owl and completely negate that 1/1's usefulness. It's good for removing Taunt, Divine Shield, attack and defense buffs, things like that. And by having your creatures do different things when you summon them and put them into play, you make them more valuable by default. Direwolf Alpha is great because it gives your adjacent minions +1 attack. It lets you get in for extra damage, and it makes it harder to kill those minions with damage because they're doing a little more themselves. For example, if Direwolf Alpha is next to a Scavenging Hyena, that Scavenging Hyena is now a 3/2, and maybe a Voidwalker, which is a 1/3 taunt, could have taken on the Scavenging Hyena with some attack boost. Now it's also going to die in the process. It'll make your opponent think twice about attacking it. Finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about before diving into a test game to test this mid-range deck is tying everything together with a theme. And I find that while you don't always want to build your deck around a central theme, it sometimes helps to keep you and your cards consistent. I remember when I was first playing Magic, when I first played Hearthstone, I would want to throw every single card I had into a deck, and I learned very quickly that it is better to have a theme or a reason to keep your card list shorter and to learn how to value cards in order to properly make a deck with better cards. So to go with that, the theme I've created here is beasts. So a lot of my cards are based on good beasts. A lot of my spells and weapons are based on good beasts. And I pick that theme. You can pick a theme by creature, by spell, by whatever. You can pick it by card. You can also pick it by ability. So for example, if you want to make a really good, quick and easy Demon Hunter deck, go with Outcast. Just search for the keyword Outcast and pretty much put in just about every card with Outcast that you find, and then once you're there, assess your deck, look through all those different cards with Outcast and go, alright, how many creatures do I have? How many spells do I have? What do they do? I have some removal, I have some card draw, I have lifesteal, I have giving myself extra attack. Now what do I need? Well, I probably need a bit more removal and card draw, probably need a little more other things, and then I need a win condition or something on the higher end. You could do the same thing for Death Rattle. Death Rattle decks are very easy to make. They actually, again, are popular with Demon Hunter. There are currently quest cards from the United in Stormwind quest line. That's a great way to kind of force yourself into a theme. For example, all of the rogue quests are about playing SI 7 cards. So the first step to making that deck is to search for all the SI cards, put in all of them, and then remove the ones that don't work. So for example, I put in SI Skulker, so I thought it was good card draw. SI Infiltrator, I actually think my jury's out, because I don't have any secrets. He shouldn't be in there. He is, but he shouldn't be. And so the quests are a great way to do that. There's plenty of things to consider when making a theme. Go with what you think is fun, and then more importantly, stick to it and use that theme as a starting point. So here my theme was beasts. I actually started making this deck with Mountain Bear and Savannah Highmane first and Trampling Rhino, and I said these are my heavy hitters, these are my win condition, these are good beasts. Now let's go through, start at the beginning, and focus on what I want. So I put in some of the quicker aggressive creatures like Wolpertinger and Direwolf Alpha, and Scavenging Hyena, because those are good cards to have in a beast deck, and those are good aggressive cards to have because they gain attack quickly and they work fast. For some of my mid-range cards, I have Revive Pet, which allows me to get back beasts that died. Dire Frenzy, which not only makes a beast of mine bigger, but also puts 3 more that are also bigger into my deck. Because it's a mid-range deck, I had some removal, but removal is not necessarily part of the theme. The theme is beasts. Hopefully I've made sense. Feel free to listen to this video again and again, as it should help you learn how to craft your own deck. Hopefully some of the advice that I've given is solid and not just me ruminating on how I've built decks over the years. Since I said this was a 30-minute video and I'm already 20 minutes in, I'm going to go ahead and play a few test games for you. Oh, would you look at that? That's better. So this is actually a decent starting hand for being in second, although, yeah, I'll keep that. Iron Deep Trog. This is actually a really good card. This is just a good card in general. It provides a lot of strong aggro for a good player. Because if I were to cast a spell, for example, if I were to cast my coin, then I would instantly be facing down 2 of these. And then, because there's 2, the next spell would get me 4. And then he would have his board filled, and I would have 7 of those to play against. Oh, so it's that kind of game. So, I have a lot of things I could do with this deck, but I think the best course of action for me is to wait a turn until I play Iron Beak Owl, at which point I can silence his Iron Deep Trog and do more. Direwolf Alpha is just going to die against it, and he has other uses. Scavenging Hyena, same thing. And Quick Shot doesn't deal enough damage to kill him in one shot. If you can play a spell that destroys him in one spell, he won't trigger. Oh, whoops. I forgot to use my hero power. Oh, fun. Whenever I play aggro, I don't like having both my Iron Deep Trogs in the same place at the same time. But it looks like my opponent's going wide with my board. I think he just underestimates me, or he wants to try and go for a win in a hurry. So we're going to silence you and end the turn. Still not going to cast a spell until I've dealt with that second Trog. Just because I don't want my enemy multiplying. I might play Quick Shot. And a control deck and a mid-range deck will often take some early game aggro damage, but will have the card value to come out on top. So we're going to do 3 damage here, and because that's enough to destroy it, it won't come back. see what my opponent does. So this is the hallmark of an aggro deck. Turn 5, you've got one card in hand, everything you have is on the field. Whereas with a mid-range deck, you can see that I've got plenty of cards in hand. Oh no, I'm going to kill that because it is Wind Fury. And I'm also picking my shots carefully. Like, I took that out because it has Wind Fury. Whereas the Iron Deep Trog is silenced, and I don't see him playing a card that will put him back in his hand. I think a Druid could, but... Also, if you're learning how to play or build decks, Hearthstone Deck Tracker is a wonderful tool, especially during the game. It lets you know what's left in your deck, and you can pull up card text and see what's what. It also has an option to tell you how much damage you have on the field, which is useful. Alright, so this is an intermediate tip. We're going to play a game called Guess the Trap. Discover a secret and cast it. So if I were my opponent, I would have played Ice Trap. And unfortunately, the only way I have to test what trap it is to attack with my only creature. I am going to play that. It gets me a 4/4 beast with Rush. We're going to play that. So it's probably Explosive Trap. And as soon as I hit end turn, we're going to find out if it's opened the cages or not. It's opened the cages. Oof. Huffer. Fun. I am surprised that my opponent is going for my face. Is this still... Oh, my opponent wins it.
Well played. Thanks.
Alright, that was a defeat if I ever saw one, and I've seen a lot of those in my day. Thank you for watching my video for the full half hour. Thank you for hopefully learning a thing or two about how to build decks and what mechanics are involved. Please tune in next time where I will focus on a different style of deck, how to make it, how to test it, and what to look for. This will hopefully be a series as I move forward. Please check me out if you can. I am V, Cosmere Connoisseur. Connoisseur, for those who need help spelling, it is C-O-N-N-O-I-S-S-E-U-R. Again, C-O-N-N-O-I-S-S-E-U-R. I promise you, stick with me long enough and we'll both learn how to spell it together. Cosmere Connoisseur, and the only one that's different is Twitter, and that's because I had to spell it weird, so Twitter is C-O-S-M-E-R-E C-O-N-I-S-O-O-R. It's the wrong spelling, but that's because it was too long otherwise. Please tune in, look forward to my next video, where I will tutorial how to make an aggro deck and what advice I can give you while playing said aggro deck.